and we're starting a few minutes early. And what we thought we would do first of all is talk about one of my favorite towns, which is Asheville, North Carolina. I live about 50 minutes away. So I was actually up there last night enjoying the hospitality at Sierra Nevada.
Nice.
And then, yeah, are you going to visit Sierra Nevada while you're there, John?
Definitely. Yeah. I've heard many nice things about it, and so definitely plan to check it out.
Well, I tell people, I think if Walt Disney designed a brewery, it would look like the one in Mills River. It is just gorgeous, and I'll have to send you the picture I took last night. Okay. It was kind of miserable, but it made for a beautiful picture. It was about 33 degrees and raining hard, but they have a beautiful glass front to the facility, and so it made a pretty nice picture. So I'll send that to you, but you'll really enjoy it. They have a lot of great events there, a lot of great people, and they say, and I would have to agree with them, that their restaurant there is one of the top ones in the state.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I know I've been to Chico a couple of times, and that's phenomenal all around. I mean, the restaurant, the brewery. Yeah. So I imagine if it's as you describe, it's even better than Chico.
Well, they put a lot of money into it, and it is just a beautiful facility. I love going there, and I can't get my wife to every brewery, but I can usually get her to that one.
I know how that goes. Yeah.
So we'll see you in mid-March, or I guess a little late March, at March 23rd.
Yep, 22nd and 23rd for the Brew Your Own Boot Camp there in Asheville. I forget what which hotel we're going to be at, but it's available on the BYO website, byobootcamp.com kind of thing. There's a link down here at the bottom of the screen. And those boot camps are really, I mean, you look at that and you think, okay, well, they're going to talk about brewing. It's going to cost me a chunk of money. But you really are in an all-day class with a couple of experts, a couple of people that such as Chris White, Brad Smith, Drew Beecham, Danny Kahn, Marshall Schott, myself, lots of some fairly knowledgeable people, and it's a chance for you to sit and talk with us to talk to you about some subjects in depth. I'm going to do 2 classes on Friday where John Blickman and I are doing the essential all grain essentials class. Talk about enzymes, malting, mashing regimens, mashing techniques, decoction, brew in a bag, and so on. And then and we're going to do some actual mashes. Then on Saturday, I'm doing my in-depth water class. You get the chance to jump in with both feet. We're going to do some mini mashes. We're going to do some water adjustments, pH measurements. It's going to be hands-on water adjustments. So if you've been wanting to learn water adjustments or, not sure if you're doing it right, this is a perfect opportunity to learn.
Well, and I'm going to capture as much as I can when I'm there, but this will be the first time I've ever been to this event either, so I'm really looking forward to it.
It's a good time.
It really sounds like it. I mean, what other event have you ever been to? CBC and HomebrewCon and all that. But this is a small group. These are small classes. It'll be just a few hundred people and a dozen teachers, right?
Yeah, there's 35 people per class. So it's a classroom. And you're there with us for 6 hours while we talk about and demonstrate these various aspects of brewing. And then afterward, there's a social hour and, chit chat, drink different beers. There's going to be some vendors there, a little bit of a trade show too. So, it's kind of like HomebrewCon and kind of like CBC, but much more intimate. It's much smaller group of people.
Okay, and if you stay there at the hotel, we might bump into you.
Yep, very much so. Yeah, or at the local breweries. With Sierra Nevada and New Belgium, or Oscar Blue. I mean, there's so many there in town. I'm probably going to be kind of busy sightseeing.
Yeah, Oscar Blues is a little distance away,
okay.
But you can hit the slope, the South Slope, I think they call it, and Green Man and Burial. There's a whole group of them there. White Labs.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to get White Labs actually to do a webinar. I'm talking to one of their people now. So White Labs is there, and they've got a great tasting and it's not really a tap room. It's one of the only places I've ever been, and I don't know that they do this anywhere else, John, but you can go in and they will have the same beer with different yeasts.
Yes.
The same wort.
They have that there at San Diego and in Boulder.
So it's just a great time. I love going to Asheville.
Yeah.
So and again, I'm not pushing this because I get anything from it. It's just a great opportunity to hang out with John, and it's a fun town. So anyway, I would say, John, we've got a cold beer waiting on us to start into a commercial calibration, and this has always become my favorite part of the webinars. I really. I love the topics, but you do a great job, and the other speakers. So I'm going to open mine up here, which will mean I'll have to step off camera just a little bit. But we will. I'll go full screen with you, so that won't look so bad.
All right. This is the Bell's Kalamazoo Stout. Last program we looked at the Bell's American Porter, or I should just say Porter. And lovely beer that is. This is a stout, and so it's interesting to compare the two. This pours with a much darker head than the porter did. This was a definite tan. Oops, where's the camera? There we go. Definite tan color as opposed to the ivory of the porter. About the same color. Can't really see through it. Ruby highlights, deep brown, but definitely a more roast note in the aroma of this beer than the porter. The porter I interpreted more as sweet chocolate, toasted marshmallow, and some spice, and almost like smelling a root beer. Whereas with the stout. Yeah, definitely more of a roast character. There's some of the vanilla and spice that was in the porter as well, but I would say that this is, definitely more stout-like than the porter. Less sweet. I don't get the aroma of sweetness. It's a broader smell, if that makes sense too.
Yeah, I'm getting a little dried fruit in it. It's very nice.
Yes. The mouthfeel on this is much fuller too than the porter.
Not anything like you'd get with an imperial, but it's more like dried cherries, dried, very like a fruit cake.
Yeah. So this is a 6% beer. So 6%, that's probably around 1057, going down to about 1012, probably. Maybe 1060 down to 1012, 1014. But yeah, nice full mouthfeel, creamy, not overly bitter, very well balanced. It's not excessively bitter. It's not excessively sweet. Just a very nicely balanced drinking beer. I'm not getting any high alcohol notes, such as you might taste with like a 7 or 8% beer. Yep, get the dried fruit. No raisin, but some dried cherry. Yeah. Cocoa. Yeah, very nice. Very nice.
Very, very clean finish. It gives just a little bit of a coffee-like aftertaste.
Yeah, this is not as roasty as some stouts I've had, or even as roasty as some porters I've had. Very, very nicely executed beer, I think.
When I was telling some people I was looking for it, and in Greenville, it is a little bit of a challenge to find. They were saying it was going to be an awesome beer. So this is actually, I'm glad you recommended it. It's the first time I've had it, and I love it.
Yeah,
it's a good beer.
Yeah, it's very nice. You get, and there's so much room to the stout style, from the dry Irish to the sweet, milk stouts. This one I think is nicely in the middle. There's some sweetness, not super dry, not super sweet, very nicely balanced.
So John, one of the issues with making a beer this dark is, of course, keeping your pH where it needs to be in the mash.
Right. Yep.
So can you relate to that a little bit? As
yeah.
I don't want you to get into the presentation, but I think this is a great chance to talk about it.
Yeah. So when you're brewing a stout with a high percentage of roast malts, the roast malts have acidity, as well as the caramel malts. Actually, caramel malts are a little higher in acidity than roast malts. Roast malts have had some of that acidity boiled out of them, for lack of a better description. But when you have this dark a grain bill, you need a water that has enough residual alkalinity in it to buffer that pH drop from the acidity of the malts. And so this is why when we're adjusting water, we're actually looking for alkalinity for darker styles to balance the acidity of dark malts and still achieve a mash pH in that target range, 5.2 to 5.6, where the enzyme activity is good, optimum, I should say.
So as we consider this beer through your presentation, John, is there? I know one of the questions that I've always seen raised, and I think Gordon Strong actually came up with the process of actually adding the dark grains later. What do you think of that?
Again, it depends on the water chemistry you have. If you, like your water there near Charlotte, Nashville, it's a very low mineral surface water. It doesn't have much alkalinity in it. It doesn't have much buffering capability. So your mash pH, if you were to mash your dark grains with your base grains, your mash pH would have the chance of going too low. And if it does, that can affect your enzyme activity. It can affect your conversion. Although if you go look at Brewlosophy, there's an interesting experiment where they tested that with low mash pH using acid, and it didn't seem to have an significant effect, which is interesting. But anyway, the literature says that can negatively impact your conversion. Let's see what the other thing is.
If you can't think of it, I've got one.
Okay.
Because I've read a lot of recipes that call for a protein rest with a stout. What do you think of that?
No. Unless you're using a low modified malt, a less modified malt, I don't see any reason to do a protein rest for a stout. There's nothing. I mean, the amount of adjuncts that the roasted barley, the roast malt, and so on that you're using in a stout is only about 15%, total. So you're not really getting into that protein deficit region like you would be with American Light Lager. Yeah. Okay. Going back to the mash question. So if your water is low alkalinity, then yes, you could add your roast grains at the end of the mash. Excuse me, got some of my eye. You could add your roast grains at the end of the mash, and that way your pH would be more in line for good conversion, and then you could add the roast grains at the end of the mash when conversion's done to extract their flavor and color. Now, because you're mashing them for a shorter amount of time, you may need to use more consequently. but that's the trade-off.
Well, it's the bottom of the hour, John. So
okay.
I think we can go ahead and get this party rolling.
Okay.
So welcome to the BJCP February webinar with John Palmer. I'm your host, Doug Piper, and I appreciate you allowing me to join you as we grow our beer skills together. I really appreciate your time. And just so you know a little bit about who I am, I'm a certified Cicerone and a BJCP beer judge, and I'm working on advanced ranks too. And honestly, while the Greenville area is very close to Beer City, USA, which is Asheville's pet name, and I know there's some other cities that claim that too, there's not too many BJCP judges in my area, and I have to make a long drive. So that kind of started all of these webinars, the BJCP study groups, and I just want to share the information that I'm gleaning from experts such as John today. John's done several of our webinars, and if you've looked and seen, we have quite a few other webinars, and we've got more coming.
Mm-hmm.
Today, John is going to specifically help us with questions and preparations for the BJCP written exam. And this is the question having to do with mashing. And for those of you that were in the previous webinar, we talked about the enzymes. And this is going to dovetail right into it. As a matter of fact, it's the same slide presentation. So everybody that is signed up for either webinar will get the full slide deck. If you missed this webinar or the previous one, of course, all you've got to do is click the same button that you did to join us.
Right.
So, John, let's jump right into mashing as soon as I just cover a couple of quick housekeeping items.
Okay.
Down here at the bottom of the screen, I just want you to know all the buttons that are here. The most important one, I think, is the Ask a Question button. It looks like we've got 9 questions there already. And just please make a note that if you find that there's a question on there that you already would like to address, you can vote that up with your one vote. And that way we can get through the questions a little bit quicker. If you don't see a question there, that please consider adding it on. In addition, we've got a green bar there at the bottom center. You've heard us talking about John Palmer's class in Asheville, North Carolina, coming up the middle of next month. I will be there in the classes. I'm not teaching anything, and you be thankful for that. But John is teaching, and there's some discounts associated with it if you sign up by the 22nd. Again, I'm doing this simply because John's going to be there. There's no incentives from the BJCP study group. We just look forward to seeing you there. The other comment that I'd like to make is if your webinar freezes up, please do a refresh. Also, if you can't hear sound, check the mute button first. But a refresh fixes almost everything. So just refresh, and that should get everything unstuck. And last but not least, this is all viewer funded. And I appreciate the support that I've gotten so far on these webinars, and to continue them, I really need your support. So help offset the expenses. We can get more speakers coming. We've got about 4 that we're looking at in the next few weeks, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So with that, let's jump into our presentation with John Palmer. And let's see. I think I've covered just about everything. So let me introduce John Palmer. John is the Editor-in-Chief of Publications Director at the Master Brewers Association of America. He's had 20-plus years in aerospace and medical devices. He's the author of the largest-selling brewing book, How to Brew, Brewing Classic Styles, and the Water Book. And, John, we just really appreciate you helping us today with this tough question, but it's one I know that's just easy for you. So thank you for doing this.
Well, you're very welcome. Glad to be here. Yeah, all the information that I'm covering in today's webinars is readily available in the late edition of How to Brew. So if you get a chance to pick up a new copy of the latest edition, I recommend you do so because it's in there. But yeah, let's jump right into the presentation. I'm gonna cover a bit of material that we talked about earlier today in the enzyme section. So the question, the BJCP question for mashing says, discuss the mashing process. Your answer should address explaining what happens during the mashing process, including time and temperatures as appropriate. 30% is identify and describe 3 mashing techniques, and then discuss the advantages and disadvantages of each. Okay, well, let's discuss the mashing process. What happens? Oh, I gotta get back over here. So the mashing process consists of crushing the grain into smaller pieces. This allows it to rehydrate better. Then step 2 is solubilization of the starch. This is also called gelatinization. And essentially it means that we're going to take the grain, we're going to crush it, we're going to allow it to soak up water more easily, and by doing so, we're going to dissolve these starches that are in the endosperm of the barley, in the malt. And now you can get solubilization simply by hydrating, and you can get it simply by temperature, but it works best if you do both at once. So this is why we soak the grain in hot water in the mash, is to solubilize these starches, get them to unwind from their tight little bundles and the starch granules that we get from the endosperm. They dissolve, they open up their chains, and now they're more like a long or a big weeping willow kind of tree shape floating around in the mash. But that very dense weeping willow kind of structure is hard for the enzymes to get into. So the step 3 is liquefaction, and alpha amylase is generated by the barley in the endosperm and in the embryo during malting, and it acts to break up these very dense chains, these highly attached complex chains, into separate chains. And so now we break up the viscosity of the mash using alpha amylase and get a less viscous mash that allows easier enzyme action to the rest of the starches. Once that's done, now beta amylase and limit dextrinase can also take part and get in there and start breaking up those complex chains into very simple sugars. So here's the mashing process: the crush, the solubilization of the starch, then liquefaction, and then conversion. Let's look at some gelatinization temperatures now. You'll see in various textbooks and various papers different numbers. These are general or typical numbers. Again, as we've discussed in previous webinars, barley, wheat, rye, oats, these are all agricultural products. And we're not talking about a single variety of barley or a single variety of wheat. We're talking about hundreds of varieties grown in different parts of the world with different climates. Each of these varieties and climates will produce slightly different chemistries and properties. And that's why we talk about typical gelatinization ranges, is because we're trying to cover the base here. But in general, barley has a gelatinization temperature range of about 58 to 65 degrees Celsius, or 136 to 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Wheat is about the same, okay? So wheat and barley can be used in a typical mash. Rye, again, most of its gelatinization range coincides with that of barley. So we can use unmalted rye in the mash and get it to convert. Same with oats. Most of its gelatinization range is within the barley mashing temperature range. But then you have other grains such as sorghum and corn and rice, which have higher gelatinization temperatures. They don't become soluble in the typical mashing temperature range. And therefore, especially in the case of rice and corn, they require cooking first. You cook them. You put them on the stove, you fill the pot with water and cook the crap out of them for an hour or so to get all those starches soluble. Once they're soluble, now you can put them back into the barley mash. The enzymes will act on those soluble starches and convert them to sugars. Very, very timely and interesting advertisements on during the Super Bowl this year. If you watch those, Doug, do you happen to see some of those commercials?
I did. Is this the one on the corn syrup?
Yes.
I love that one.
It was very funny. I mean, for brewers, for people that know what's going on, it's kind of tongue in cheek, a little fanciful because, hey, adjuncts are very much a part of beer. I mean, there's only a few styles of beer that you brew without adjuncts. So the fact that it's a corn syrup as opposed to corn grits, very small difference, really. It's still corn, and it's still being those corn sugars are the starches, the corn starches and rice starches are still being converted by amylase enzymes into maltose and maltodextrose and the other fermentable sugars. So it's not this high fructose corn syrup, boogeyman that we talk about in food, even though that is a total make-believe boogeyman kind of situation, in my opinion.
Well, it completely ferments out, though, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just...
Well, yeah. I mean, and I'm getting off track here, but high fructose corn syrup. Do you realize what that's saying?